Here's a raw take, podcasting again with M's Adventures, and today we're talking to Jason, and we're going to find out about his very interesting past and how he got into nude modeling. How's that for clickbait? So we hadn't seen each other in many, many years.
Yeah.
But let's take it back to the beginning.
Yes.
So, well, actually, you look good.
Well, thank you. You do too.
You look good. I don't know.
Thank
That's
you.
a lie, but thanks
No, it's not a lie. You look great.
But you look good.
Thank you.
You look a little slimmer than the last time I saw you.
Really?
Yeah. You know.
Of course, I had a cold last week, so that might was not exactly enough.
Like you blew it out in your Kleenex.
Yeah.
Lost a pound in my Kleenex.
Yes.
Yeah, that's disgusting.
Yes. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
For the
well, you do look better also because you're not sick. So
yes.
You know. But so you were on. I know you were on a panel about being an art model.
Yes.
And now you're gonna. Have you done any gigs recently after COVID?
After COVID, I believe I've got 2 gigs under my belt. They've both been recent. Ever since COVID, the DC art scene, it's taken a while to get back up to speed. There's a lot of venues that haven't reconvened, or they're just starting to, and they're not booking live models with the same frequency that they used to.
Yeah.
It's basically like my friend who's the art model guru, I would say. We're all having to start all over from scratch, a lot of the usual haunts. You're having to reapply to, so right now.
But you had the basic, I mean, there's no like organization, or there's an organization, an informal organization of art models?
There used to be the Figure Models Guild, and now there's the DC Art Models. Oh geez, of course I'm spacing on the name. It's the DC AMC, I believe.
Okay.
It's a organization that helps to put models in touch both with other models and with artists.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And I mean, obviously, because that is something that's very in person. I mean, that's the whole point.
Right. I'm looking to see the actual name of the organization so I can go ahead and rep it.
I believe he's using jargon, rep it, shout out, or product placement, whatever you want to call it. So that is something that's very, and now the question everyone will want to know, when you're an art model, is this like without clothing?
Yes, it is. Actually, it's the...
Or sometimes is it with clothing?
Exactly. It's the DC AMC, by the way.
Which stands for Art Models...
DC Art Models Collective, I think. This sounds horrible that I can't even remember that. I apologize. I feel so bad. I apologize to anybody who's in the group who's listening now, and I'm spacing on it. But yes, I would say... There's portrait modeling, which is almost 100% clothed, and they're really only drawing you generally from the neck up, sometimes, from your waist up.
Okay.
Then there's, your typical figure modeling, which is, I would say, 80 to 85% nude.
Now, is this completely nude, or is there like a little string?
Yes. Well, it's funny you mention that. 99% of the time when you are nude, you're exactly that, you're nude. There have been a handful of times I've posed for a place that didn't want to work with a totally nude model, so you'd have to wear like a G-string or a thong or something like that. Which is funny.
Is this something you already had in your wardrobe, or did you like...
I had to go out and get one. It's a very plain black, nondescript. It's funny because Sean Connery used to be an art model, and I saw he used to be an art model. I believe
during university days, or
exactly.
Okay,
I think he was
make
probably
some money.
He was in his early 20s, I think, and I saw some drawings of him. And again, he's having to wear the same kind of thong or G-string to cover up, but. No, most of the time when it's nude, it's fully nude.
Okay. Because I've talked to you before, so I think you made like your own kit, right? So,
yes.
So because like I think for a an average person, like the concept is like, wait, so you sign up, you go to an art class, and there's going to be a nude model there, and like, are they there naked when you get there, or like what happens? Like, set the scene for us.
It's basically what I used to wonder the same thing too, and it's funny because there really was never there are things that you almost have to pick up on your own. That, you know, we did have the Figure Models Guild at one time, but not every person who modeled was either affiliated with the guild or frankly even knew about the guild. Right. So what I'm getting at is, in a lot of places, it was, you kind of have to kind of almost figure out, you know, possibly going in blind. Generally what happens though is you arrive, you talk with the coordinator or the professor. People start setting up their easels. You'll go into like it's usually a bathroom, and then you'll disrobe, you'll put on a bathrobe, you'll go out, you'll kind of, you know, kind of sit in the corner for a little bit until they're ready to go ahead and start staging the model stand, get the lights and everything ready to go.
Right.
Pardon. But yeah, it's nobody ever really like, no, you could just go ahead and hang out there. And I'm like, how many people just kind of hang out nude in front of a bunch of strangers?
Dig in. I'm gonna find out how these clam bellies.
Oh, these look yummy.
Yeah. Not as juicy as the ones in Maine, but you know. And then there's tartar sauce. And lemon, if you like to squeeze lemon.
Generally not, but I will have a little bit of lemon.
A little,
okay.
We don't want to make it soggy. You know. So that's an awkward time when they should have let you hang out in the bathroom. The equivalent of like a green room.
It was only for maybe a minute or so I could kind of understand. And again, this is someone I had worked with for several times in the past, so I felt honestly safe. You know, but it's like one of those things, it's almost like, you know, if you're a new model, it could kind of play with your mind. Just like certain things you wouldn't even kind of come to expect, you know, certain situations. But yeah, so generally that's it. You disrobe right before they start the poses, and when you take a break, you put on your robe. Flip-flops are something I highly recommend. Those floors can be utterly filthy sometimes. But generally I bring along, I used to have a much bigger model bag. I used to carry a yoga mat.
Wow. For what?
Just in case, because sometimes those podiums are not particularly comfortable. Sometimes you'll actually be on like a tile floor, for instance. So it gives you a little bit of extra cushioning. I'd have like a little, like, not a first aid kit, but it would have some Band-Aids, it would have some like deodorant, it would have just things to make you feel kind of more comfortable.
Yeah.
So, but really the only thing you need is a bathrobe and a set of flip-flops.
Yeah. And then, do they pay you?
Yes. I have worked some charity gigs, which you were volunteering your time, but generally it is paid. If it's a...
is there anything else in grab for you guys? Not right now.
Oh, not right now. The clams are delicious. Thanks.
Wait, so how would nude modeling be a thing you would do for charity?
There was a person I used to work with.
That's kind of strange.
Yeah, there was a person I was working with, and he put on something for the Wounded Warrior Project, and he would collect an attendance fee for the artist that wanted to come in and draw, and it was he called it a draw till you drop session. So you paid a flat fee of like maybe $10, but you could draw all day if you wanted to. You could, you know, leave for lunch and come back. And he was very clear at the onset, hey, look, it's a volunteer gig. You're not getting paid, you know, so I totally get it if you don't want to do this. But no, I did it a couple of times. There was always a decent turnout. It was really interesting because in each of those cases that I worked, you were working with multiple models at the same time, both men and women. So it was, and he told you this ahead of time. It wasn't like you got there and like, oh geez, I gotta, work with another model. Maybe I'm not comfortable working with a man or a woman, whatever. He was totally upfront with that. But that was the exception to the rule. Generally, most places don't work with more than one model, and typically not if it's male, female, for a variety of reasons.
Right.
You have to you're doubling the amount that you're paying the models. And then there's certain people don't want to work with other certain people, or they don't want to maybe work with them if they don't know them. These are all totally legitimate, concerns.
I mean, that brings up the very elephant in the room kind of thing, that because if you had a male and a female model, is it going to get into porn? Or are you going to position them in ways that are pornographic, right? So, but this is totally not pornographic and not sexual at all, really.
No, not at all.
Nude modeling is an old tradition, and it is not sexual.
In the least. I can tell you that whenever I've been on...
It's pretty darn not sexy, probably, being the model.
Oh, it is. It's... I tell people, because that's one of the things that, it's the elephant in the room, like you said, everybody asks, well, what is it? Even if you're by yourself, what's like, it's the least sexual thing you can do. You're in front of strangers. It's hard work being, getting in those poses. I'm in pain. Sex is the furthest thing from my mind.
Right.
And
so let's talk about, it is painful. It's really, really hard work because, as an art model, you just stand there? Do they ask you to move? Do they ask you to, strike a pose? Sit, lie down?
Oh, it varies. Generally, it depends on the drawing group or the professor you work with. Generally what happens is they'll warm up the group with some gesture poses, which are very quick, anywhere from 30 seconds to 3 minutes, that usually they're expected to be more action style poses, so they're going to be more dynamic, which doesn't mean that you can't sit, but you want to make those poses a bit as dynamic as you can, possibly make them.
So what do you do now that you're an experienced? We'll go into this experienced art model. So what are your do you remember your first time when they're okay, do poses? What did you do?
That's right, because
pretend you're ringing a bell. I don't know, milking a cow.
It varies because some people, what I like to do is I prefer doing gesture poses, frankly, to longer poses, because you can get more creative. And even if it's a fairly grueling pose, you're only holding it for a couple of minutes, tops.
Okay.
Now, I will say, usually I try to make them more, I guess, realistic, in the sense that I'm not doing an abstract pose like I'm bent over myself or anything. I might act like I'm throwing a football, or I'm talking with someone on the phone, or I'm maybe going like this, like I'm trying to catch a ball and I stretch my limbs out. I did have one professor who did not care for that. Generally, though, it is much appreciated.
You were doing real world poses.
Exactly.
Yeah, it wasn't always I'm king of the world.
Right, exactly. You were doing something I would try to do poses that you could see in regular life. Maybe exaggerated a little bit just for effect. And I always enjoyed doing them, and a lot of times I would get compliments that said, "Oh, these are great these are really great real life poses. I believed you when you acted like you were waiting on a bus or you were checking your watch."
Yeah.
Sometimes I'd have people applaud at the...
Wow.
Right, yeah. It was not every time, and I don't expect that to happen by any means. I'm not out there to look for that. It is very heartwarming when it does happen.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like when people clap when someone lands a plane.
Yes, or at the end of a movie, or...
So, at a session, these people, these artists or aspiring artists, whatever, they're all sitting in front of you, or are they sitting around you?
It depends. Sometimes they're... Hold on one second. Cheese dippers, or crab dippers. Generally, I would say it's either they're all around you, or it's at a 180-degree plane, like your podium's up against the wall, and then everybody's out almost in a semicircle.
Oh, okay.
So The first couple of times I modeled, it was like that. Like I'd have a wall as my background, and I would try to, I guess, hide what I thought was my bad side.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. And
What's your bad side?
Well, I can't remember what it was at like the time. I'm on it because, I mean, we're talking, this is going back to like 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
There was this one particular, thoughts where maybe I had some scars or cellulite or things like that.
But if you're out there, I mean, like, to an average person, if you're out there being an art model, you must have a huge ego and a perfect body.
Oh, no, by all means.
And just think a lot of yourself.
No, I would say, and I mean, I've seen models run the gamut, and we come from all walks of life. We have all different body types. We are all different ages. People need to be able to draw people who aren't, let's say, for example, you're statuesque blonde, or you're, square-jawed guy with a six-pack abs or something like that. But what I was getting at was there was a time, it was at the old Corcoran, the downtown location, and they had me on a square podium that's rectangular, it's about the size of this table we're eating at. And everybody was seated around me, so I thought, okay, you know what? I can't hide my bad side anymore. So I'm going to have to embrace it. And it was really funny because when they were beginning art students.
Okay.
So the professor said, hey, I don't care what pose you get into. You could sit there, you could stand there with your hands at your sides. I don't care. This is their first time drawing from a live nude model. I just want them to get the experience.
Yeah.
So, but it was funny because as much as I was worrying about it in my head, when I got dressed and started to leave, I would bump into some of the students and they're like, yeah, you were so lifelike, like you freaked me out when you blinked because it was like I was drawing a statue and then all of a sudden you blinked a little bit.
Wow, so you were really good at it.
Right, yeah. So I took it as a compliment.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do, and that's not to say that, I mean, I've had body dysmorphia issues, I still do.
Because when you started out, you were a lot heavier than you are now.
Correct.
And for the people, obviously, because nobody can see you, you were definitely not a skinny guy.
No, I was. Well, I do want to say that I probably, because you saw me at my very first session.
I did, yeah. So we should talk about how you got into this.
No, and that was in 2008. I will say I gained weight from 2008 up until a couple of years ago, although not modeling due to COVID, that doesn't count. But I actually did start getting heavier and heavier, but at the same time, because I was more experienced, I didn't let it play with my mind as much. Once COVID started to hit and I started to ramp back up against those, that body dysmorphia still kind of came into play, even though nobody's judging you. But so let's talk about my first time.
Yeah, so your first time, I was there, so while you eat a bite or two, finish the clam belly, I'll explain. It was a cavernous space, which is always good for art students. It's an art studio of a painter from Louisiana, Sarah Thibodeau?
Sarah Griffin Thibodeau.
Sarah Griffin Thibodeau, and she was leading an art class, and so there weren't too many people. I mean, but a good number, 6 or 7 maybe people, and it was pretty dark, I remember, but there were some spotlights, and you did some. I'm not sure you actually did any movements. I think you might have basically done one sitting pose.
It was.
The thing that people will want to know is, how did you get into it, and why did you want to do it?
It's funny, the reason I got into it was because I read your Yelp review of an open drawing session that was at a school a couple blocks away from here. I can't remember the name of it. I can't remember what the name of the facility.
Yeah, it was in a basement. I was taking classes there.
And I read your Yelp review, And I don't know what made me think about it, because I think you had said, it was
I was talking about the model who was crying.
Yes, and I want to talk about that, too, about what I suspect might have been the case, because it's not what I think a lot of people would think. But I read that, and I thought, well, geez, I could go ahead and sit down for 3 hours and have people draw me, ha, 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 and then I push it out of my mind. But over the coming days, I kept thinking about it. And it got me to thinking, well, when was the last time I really did anything kind of, I hate to say wild and crazy, because that's not what art modeling is, but to the
but it's definitely
layperson.
It's pushing your boundaries.
Oh, definitely.
Taking your clothes off in front of people.
Exactly. And what I did was, I reached out to you, and you said, hey, I can kind of run your name by some people, but just no guarantees that anything will come of it.
Let's be frank. First, we had a lot of back and forth, because I was trying to figure out if this was a pervy thing.
Right.
Because I did not want you to be doing this for pervy reasons.
And some people do. They wash out very quickly, but it does happen, I hate to say.
Because I would think that, there might be a few people who do it because they think, because they get their rocks off being naked in front of people.
Oh, yeah.
But then I would think that your body breaking from the agony of holding a pose would quickly kill that excitement.
Yeah, just because, yes, it's hard to be aroused when, frankly, your back and your feet are screaming in pain because you picked a pose that you misjudged how comfortable it was going to be, and, hey, you're 5 minutes into a 20-minute pose, and you really don't want to break that pose.
Yeah.
So, but no, we did have back and forth, and you put me in contact with Sarah, and she replied back, and she said, hey, I don't need anybody right now, but hey, I'll keep your name, in case something comes up.
Yeah.
So I didn't hear from her for a couple of weeks, and I thought, okay, she thinks I'm some weirdo, whatever.
Yeah.
I get a call from her, and
how does a person get into this, right?
Right, exactly.
How do you get into art modeling? That's not a thing that...
Right, and there's a glut of male, which I can talk about later, there's a glut of male models for whatever reason in DC. Yeah. So it could have been like, hey, I've got a backlog of 6 other men asking me for work, So all of a sudden I get a call one day, and I didn't pick it up because I didn't recognize it. But then I saw, hey, wait, 503 area code. Isn't that New Mexico? Which I knew she had lived there previously. Oh. So she leaves me a message and says, yeah, Jason, I've got a class tonight. The model canceled. I'm back from vacation. Is there any way you could go ahead and, help me out?
Risky on her part?
Oh, yeah. And, on my part, too, because I was like, I thought about it for a hot second, and I thought, okay, don't even think about it.
One hot second, do it.
Just do it. So I called her. She's like, oh, thank goodness. I hung up the phone, and then I thought, okay, I can't back out because I've given my word, and I don't like to go back on my word. So I'm like, even if I want to quit, I can't. I just wouldn't be able to do it. So she gives me the directions. I go there, and
I went just to make sure that I was, being supportive.
Yes,
which I was quick break so I can take some photos.
Oh, thank you very much.
Resuming.
So, I was thankful that you were there because there's at least one friendly face in the crowd.
Yep.
And I don't even know if the topic of what I was going to do to cover up between breaks came up. And then Sarah had said, hey, I brought my bathrobe. And it was clearly a bathrobe I barely fit into, if you remember.
I remember.
So... And it was funny because I wasn't...
But it was irrelevant because I saw all of you.
Well, that's exactly it.
So it's like...
It doesn't even...
Yeah.
So what had happened, if you recall, is they were futzing around with the lights for a while. And I just started to become more like, oh, come on, can we just get this on already? Mm-hmm. That actually helped because by the time Sarah said, hey, I think we're ready for you, I'm like, oh, thank goodness, let's just get this on.
Yeah.
And I don't think there was any hesitation when I dropped my robe.
Nope.
There was it was just like, okay, I'm here, it's got to get done. I remember right after talking with Sarah the first time, when I said, hey, I'm looking to model, whatever, up until the time she called me, there were a couple times where I disrobed in front of the mirror just to go ahead and kind of. It's like, am I? No,
but don't you disrobe in front of yourself?
Well, it was
all the time?
Well, it was more like a, hey, this is just, I need to be comfortable in my own body. This is the mirror.
Let me take a look at what I actually look like.
Right, the mirror reflection is what people are going to see. Are you okay with that? Like, okay, I determined I was okay with it, but you're right.
We're doing better there than 99% of humanity.
Well, thank you. So I disrobed, and you're right, it was one seated pose. She initially, I think she was going to have me standing, but because of the height of the podium and my height, she thought, hey, it might just be easier.
I think also because you were a first timer. She didn't have any time to be training you.
Well, and that makes perfect sense too, because at least, if you're sitting, it's still.
And it was a beginner class.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was one seated pose.
And if you remember, there was a band that was rehearsing
in the next room.
Yes.
There was was it rock?
It was rock.
It was really loud.
Yes. And I remember because Sarah warned me about it. Or not warned, I shouldn't say that. She told me about that and said, hey, there's going to be a band in the next room. They're going to eventually go back and forth between while they're getting their stuff. They don't look. They're totally cool with it. Again.
Yeah, it was some sort of an artsy space.
Yeah. And I saw some people come out before a few times. I just looked out of the corner of my eyes. They weren't paying me any mind, so it was a totally chill environment. And when I was done, my body was incredibly sore.
So it was a seated 40-minute pose, but did you sit completely still for those 40 minutes? No.
No. I think we did 10-minute intervals. 10 minutes, 10-minute pose.
Yeah.
10-minute break, 10-minute pose, 10-minute break until the time was up.
Yeah. Also, because so because you were new, and the art students were new, I noticed, and I've taken many art classes before, so including with Nude Models, and so I noticed that no one else was painting you below the stomach.
Yes.
And no one else there knew how this was the first time and how much courage it takes, etc. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to paint it right there. If I get to his head, whatever. But, I'm painting his thighs and what's between them, and I set up right in front. And it was a terrible, terrible painting, and I haven't found it yet. I think I may have painted over it, which again is very odd.
Right.
But if I do find it, I will give it to you.
Oh, I'd love that.
Yeah, but because I just thought, my gosh, this has taken so much courage, and then to have nobody paint what's right in front, with the whole nakedness of you.
And that happens. There's a lot of times where people draw you, and they'll omit that. And so are you trying to tell me something? And then you realize, no, there's other reasons probably why people aren't drawing it.
It's generally agreed in art history that women's bodies are more attractive than men's.
Oh, agreed.
Right? And that has nothing to do really with your sexuality.
Right.
It's just generally been always agreed that women's bodies are more attractive, they're more fluid.
Right, there's curves.
Anything else I can grab for you?
Oh, not right now.
Yeah, bring it out for you. Thanks.
That's
can
delicious.
I also get some mayonnaise? Side meal, of course. Thanks. But certainly, in terms of body parts, that is not the most a man's. It's not the most attractive.
No, it's one of those ones, and usually it's funny because I live right next to it. If I'm in a class, usually the ones that will draw it are male, and for some reason that threw me off for a second because I thought, well, a lot of men might be weirded out about it, like, oh, that's gross, I'm not going to draw that. But I think what it is most men are like, well, we've all got one,
Well, no, we don't all have one. Less than half of the world has one.
Right, so all men have one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, yeah, I was going to say, yeah, that's that. No.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of ladies do have one, but it's not down there.
Right, yeah. But, and it's funny you mentioned that because I was doing something 2 or 3 years after my first gig, and it was during a break, and I was talking with the instructor, and she had, I don't know how the subject came up, but she said she was at an open drawing group, and they had a male model, and the woman next to her looked like she was having a nervous breakdown. She was like, oh my God, like shaking.
Yeah.
And she's like, I've never seen another nude man aside from my husband. And of course, what the instructor she was thinking was like, it's just a naked man, nothing weird
But
about it.
I mean, like, frankly, ladies these days are wearing their pants so tight that you can see all of them. And I was laughing because I was walking over here and this woman was showing all her glory.
Oh boy.
In her very, very tight pants. And I thought, imagine if men start wearing that. It's going to be like, what was his name? Rudolph Nureyev, the ballet dancer?
Yeah.
But without any padding. It would just be complete, anatomy lesson. Anyway, but that aside, I mean, in general in the U.S., because the U.S. is such a prudish place, you see a lot of female nudity, right? But you never see any male nudity.
Right. I mean, if you think about it, back in the 70s and the 80s, especially in comedies, it wasn't totally unheard of that they would either show a topless woman for like a couple seconds, or horror movies were the same way, where generally you didn't see that for men.
Thanks. I can take that glass. Thank you. Thanks. So I can see that for, and I mean, it's funny you say that there are a lot of male models in DC, because I would think that there are more female nude models in general.
That's what you would think. That's frankly what I thought. Actually, I would say no. When I first started and didn't know anything, I figured it would be like a 50-50 split.
Right. But this is where we should plug that you started a blog, because nobody knew what you were doing, and you realized that nobody knew anything about this world. So Jason and the Golden Pose, your blog started.
Yes, and that was a result of, because the more I did it, the more invigorated I felt. It gave me a sense of meaning and purpose that had frankly been lacking for a while. So I enjoyed writing about it.
That's a good reward for going way out over the line.
Exactly.
Stepping off a cliff.
And so I would, mention it, what I would do on some of my Facebook posts. And I got a lot of, curious questions from people because they, it's frankly, it's shrouded in mystery. So I started writing it, and because you're right, there have been a few books written about the subject, but generally nothing about like how do you get established? What is a gesture pose? What is a long pose? When should you take your robe off? When should you put your robe back on? Talking to people during the breaks, what's that like?
You're allowed to talk to them?
It depends. There's some.
Are you allowed to look at the stuff they're working on?
You can. I usually don't. There's other models that do. It's certainly not frowned upon. I maintain a position of, like, I would talk with, like, the instructor. If the people in the group would talk to me, I would talk to them.
Okay.
Other than that, and the reason I did that wasn't because I was trying to be aloof. It's because, okay, you've got a person who was, up until a few minutes ago, nude in front of you, now in a bathrobe. The dynamics could just be a little weird, like I'm not trying to come off, especially if it's a woman, I don't want it to sound like I'm doing anything kind of creepy. It's a little different if you model enough to the point where you start to recognize people coming to different drawing groups.
Right,
because
then
you've seen them multiple
yeah.
times. And
they're like colleagues.
Right, and there's like artists, or there's like people in those drawing groups who also have their own drawing groups. So, they might come up to you during a break and say, hey, I love the poses you do. Would you come out and model for me at my studio? There are people, like, I just, for the longest time, I mean, even today, I never took pictures of the drawings that people took of me. I always, and there's other people who will definitely do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just thought a couple of things. A, if I like the drawing of me enough to where I took a picture. I probably ought to be offering to buy it from you. The second thing was, I'm not going to necessarily like every single drawing in the room. I kind of almost didn't want to put people in an awkward spot, like, hey, he took a photo of her painting and his painting. Why didn't he take a picture of mine? Am I not a good enough artist?
Oh, that's really considerate.
And I just didn't want to make anybody feel like that. So if I did take a picture,
Then you have to take everyone's photo.
right? Even though I was never
That's
going to
annoying.
do it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's annoying.
So it's funny though, because I finally got over that, I guess, reluctance.
Yeah.
Probably towards the end of one of my very last gigs before COVID put the kibosh on everything. And the woman was packing up, and I figured, okay, well, most of the people have left, so this is kind of a good time. So I said, hey, do you mind if I take a picture of it? And she's like, yeah, it's you. Go right ahead. I'd be honored.
So has anyone offered to give you, or has anyone given you what they've done?
Some people gave me copies of the drawings of their short poses, but these were like really short poses, like 1 or 2 minutes. So you can't really make, you can't tell who I am on the basis of that.
Okay.
I'm sure if I had asked, I guarantee you some people would, but again, I was just very, I didn't want to make other people feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
There was, it was really interesting. I just randomly thought about this. It was towards the end days of the Cork Arena before they got absorbed into George Washington University.
Oh.
And I did a multi-session class. At the end of right before the last class, I was at Starbucks getting a cup of coffee. I bumped into the instructor. And he said,
They are not underwriting this, by the way, Starbucks.
yes, full disclosure. So
he paid his $4 or whatever it was.
Yeah. So he said, hey, there's a woman who is asking about your availability to do private work, and he's like, I told her, well, you got to ask the model. I'm not in a position to do that. So he's like, don't feel obligated or anything, but she will probably come up to you in class, just then ask. So she did, and she gave me her name, and I figured, most artists. A lot of artists have an online portfolio. So I said, let me Google her name so I can see if she's got a website, just so I can kind of see what drawing she's looking. I didn't make the connection at the time.
And with that cliffhanger, this is the end of part 1 of our conversation with Jason, the art model, from Jason the Golden Pose. And to find out more about what it's like to be an art model, listen next time. This has been M's Adventures. Thanks for now.